Tonight on Perspective, a seismic release of millions of pages of previously unseen documents tied to Jeffrey Epstein. What's in the files? Who might they implicate? And will anyone be held accountable? I'm Scottie Nell Hughes, and this is Perspective. There's been a major development in one of the most controversial legal sagas of the last decade. The Justice Department has just released over 3 million pages of files related to Jeffrey Epstein and his network of associates as required by a new federal law. The documents include emails, communications, photos, grand jury transcripts, and disclosures about interactions with high-profile individuals. But beyond the headlines, serious questions remain. Does this release tell us something new about who might have been involved? Are there paths to real accountability? And what are the implications for survivors who have waited years for justice? Well, I want to break it down with our guest. Joining us today are legal and media analyst Lionel and creator and director of the film Out of the Shadows and Into the Light, Mike Smith. Thank you so much for joining me, gentlemen, on this issue. Lionel, you and I have been talking about this, good gracious, I'd almost say for more than 10 years, almost a whole decade, you and I have been having this discussion. When you examine the scale of these documents just released, what stands out to you most about what was disclosed?
The depravity, the sickness, the range, just when you thought you knew, just when you had an idea, it's almost goes to show you this organic evil. And what's also interesting to know, Scotty, is the number of people who at first were clamoring for this to be released. Remember the day that the influencers were at the White House and they received their white binders? Hey, they held them up. Have you heard a word from them? Have you heard anything from mainstream media? Have you heard anything from anybody? The only people calling for this to be exposed are people like you, independent, alternative, civilian, and citizen journalists, not the mainstream. But the question is, are there going to be any prosecutions? Is there going to be any justice? And I'm sorry to say, absolutely not.
Okay, Lionel, I'm going to actually, I never, ever disagree with you because you're usually right, but I'm going to disagree with you on this one issue. I actually think the public, both Republican and Democrats for the first time, are not only been made aware of it, they're calling for more accountability than what we're seeing from journalists right now. In fact, a lot of journalists are sweeping it under the carpet, mainly because their names or their cohorts' names are in these files. But I am seeing the public are the ones that are engaged. You're seeing these signs being sparked. And that's where I want to bring you in on this, Mike, because is there anything, do you think, in this newly released material that could actually realistically change the legal landscape or spark new prosecutions?
That's a great question. On the other night, I was talking with Lara Logan, and we were talking about it. And there's actually more than 3 million files. There's more that will be released, I think. Addressing will something happen? I think it's how hard will the public beat the drum? How hard will the public demand accountability? Because this is a real problem that's so easy just to dismiss because it's such a heinous, perverted group of people that do bad things to children. And I for one, I don't care if you're on the left or the right or the middle, hurting children is not okay. And people need to stand up and demand accountability, just like you're saying. And I think you're right. I think they're not sweeping this back under the rug. And we're not just going to move on and just let it go because this evil is being exposed and people are now waking up because Pizzagate, quote unquote, was a conspiracy theory. Well, it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's a conspiracy fact, and people can't ignore it. And so brave journalists like Liz Crokin and some of the other people that we know have been beating this drum for a long time. And when I started making the film Out of Shadows, that was 7 years ago. And I started looking into what Liz was saying. And Ben Swann, Ben Swann was a voice of reason back in, that show that he did, that report that he did, it cost him his job. And if it wasn't for brave people like Ben and Liz and you and Lionel and all the other people beating the drum, we wouldn't know what we know today. And now they're not just going to push it away and say, "Oh, that's conspiracy theory. Let's move on," because it's not going to happen.
Well, and that is what I think is the most frustrating part. And I'll be honest with you, I'm at the stage where I just don't care. And Lionel, maybe you and I know that you've probably suffered some questioning of your career. Like you mentioned, Ben Swann totally had his mainstream media career blown up over what we're finding out to be accurate and honest coverage of the issue. And we're talking once again about children that are being trafficked. We're talking about sex trafficking. Lionel, your wife has done significant work on this for years on this. And here, everything she was saying has turned out to be true. And yet we have our own DOJ came out with these and and our own under Republicans, which I'm still scratching my head about. And they redacted. How significant are these redactions and these missing pages? Are they going to hinder accountability? Or once again, is this just continuing to add to this drama that we'll never see results from?
I want you to understand that we represent a group of people that unfortunately are in the minority. If I walked up to Times Square, which I'm right around, and said, "How many of you have heard of Pizzagate? Can you explain to me why people like John Podesta insisted upon email after email of talking about pizza and all types of things?" They would look at you and they would say, I don't know what you're talking about. Because to us, in our world, this is foremost. I've been around since way back from 9/11 to you name it. I mean, I am a conspiracy. I'm a tinfoil hatter, and I'm used to it. In fact, if people don't push back, I think I'm on the wrong subject. I'm used to it. It validates me because remember, you only catch flack when you're over the target. The only problem is that there's so much information, and the public, I promise you, are talking more today about the Super Bowl or Bad Bunny or whatever it is than what you and I and all of us consider to be important. But understand something. It depends upon the president. It depends upon the DOJ, which I have absolutely no faith in whatsoever. None. Because remember, Jeffrey Epstein was not about this. It wasn't about sextortion. He was into banking. He was into money laundering. This guy went back all the way to weapons trafficking with Adnan Khashoggi. The storyline is that it's about sextortion. That's not it. He represents the tip of the iceberg of a level of evil that for you to explain this, I'm telling you right now, people will look at you and they say, "You're out of your mind." Why? Because they don't want to admit that people like this exist. They don't want to admit that people like this share our DNA. And by the way, whatever you think you know, it's not even close. So I'm sorry to say, I love the fact that we're talking about it. Let's keep up the fire on our end, but don't expect anything to happen from this. Sorry, I've learned too many times not to get my hopes up.
Okay, so here's a couple things that I would like to put in. Mike, maybe you can tell me this. Why are the women not naming the names specifically? If they're not, Thomas Massey said today that he was going to go and actually view the unredacted documents. They know the name. Why can't the women come out with the names? Would that help the situation in your research, from your research standpoint?
I think that is a great question, because most of the survivors that I've met, they have no problem. They've been beating their drums for years trying to explain this or tell people that what I think is they're just protecting the perpetrators. And that's where this has to stop. It's like, no, these people did this. They trafficked these women or these children, and they raped them or they hurt them or they did whatever they did. They need to be held accountable. And if you see what disgusts me the most is watching these perverts. I know that there was the guy who quote unquote debunked Pizzagate. He was an ABC reporter. He was convicted of child molestation just not too long ago, but he gets a slap on the wrist. These people need to face the death penalty. If you hurt a child, rape a child, or kill a child, and you're a pervert, you should die. I'm sorry. And I don't care if people don't have to agree with me. That's my freedom of speech, and that's what I believe. If you're hurting the innocent, you should be held accountable. And I'm not going to let this rest. I know you're not. Lionel's not. I know, Lionel, I do agree with you, though. Unfortunately, I want to point out, you've been right that nothing ever happens. Look at the Somalia fraud thing. Where'd that go? You start looking at all the things that happen, and no one's ever held accountable. What are we doing?
But Mike,
what?
and I get what you're saying, but Lionel, I've got to ask you, we know names. Those still same names are not being held accountable. We know that Alan Dershowitz was Jeffrey Epstein's attorney, and yet conservative news outlets still put him on as an expert. Alan Dershowitz should never be allowed on the mainstream media, any media, ever again. I get you say he's a lawyer, that was his job. You don't have to take it on, okay. So, but we know the names that are in there, and yet there's still not any accountability for the names that we do know. Why is this?
Okay, let me get he as a former prosecutor, as a lawyer,
Right.
let me tell you, pick a victim you want. Pick somebody, anybody. Okay, let's say, for example, just for the sake of argument, I'm making no accusations, Bill Gates.
Right.
And somebody says, in this particular case, Bill Gates did this to me. And I say, great, let's go to trial. Indict him. Indict him with what? Let's go to trial. Call your first witness. What's your name? What happened? He did this, this, and this. No, he didn't. What are you going to do? Your word against me? What happened? What did you do? Did you go to the hospital? And also, how did this happen? How did all these girls, by the way, the numbers who settled? Now, remember, this is not victim blaming, but we've got to call this the way it is. You've got to ask yourself, where did these women come from? You know who did all the recruiting? Ghislaine Maxwell and many of the alleged victims themselves. Then we're going to get into this. Do you know how big these people are? Oh, and by the way, some people who traveled, who went to various islands or his apartment on 71st Street or his mansion, Ethel Kennedy or people, half of the people from big mega news organizations who had nothing to do with this. We're confusing this. Try proving this. I mean, it's much more difficult than you realize. And you would think it's easy, but many people have come forward. But what I'm saying is, I hate to tell you this, but we don't need to have people indicted. Forget the DOJ. Forget that. That we make the justice. We're the vigilante crowd. We're the truth patrol. We're the pitchfork and torch crowd. We can do more damage with what we say than anybody from the Southern District, which would take years to come to trial. I mean, this is the way we get retribution. This way, call them out, expose them.
It's almost like this was the whole point, that they knew that this eventually, it was so big it was going to come out, but it was going to be 20 years later when you wouldn't have the medical records or that ability to actually prove it, besides just what some emails and some documents might say. Lionel, Mike, stay right there, because coming up after the break, we're going to continue to talk about, are we going to see accountability and whether there's any path to new convictions? More importantly, will we ever get the full story? Stay with us. Welcome back. As millions of pages flood public view and newsrooms comb through all the details, calls for accountability and controversy over how the release was handled are only intensifying. Let's dive deeper with our guest, legal and media analyst Lionel, and creator and director of the film Out of the Shadows and Into the Light, Mike Smith. Thank you so much for staying with us, gentlemen. Lionel, before we left off, I was mentioning how the documents are all we have as proof right now, 20 years later. Do you think that was the whole point, was to hold off actually getting a timely response to some of these convictions and these people, to where now it's like, it's too late, sort of, that we can't do anything?
Scottie, that in part, but also the idea that these people live in a different, I hate to say it, ecosystem. They live by different rules. Zorro Ranch is what you should be putting your money on. What if you went to people and said that there's this evil man named Epstein who wanted to actually change, where he was a eugenicist, who wanted to breed a new... They'll look at you like you're out of your mind. You know, Marshall McLuhan said that little lies are hard to keep secret, but big lies are easy because of our incredulity. Explain to what these people really wanted to do about children and aborted fetuses. You will sound like a lunatic, even though you haven't even told 10% of the truth. See, that's why people don't even want to get to it, because they're also afraid of being demonetized on social media or saying the wrong thing. And how do you know? The stories are bizarre. And you don't even know the half of it. Look at Prince Andrew. I can't even tell you. And if I told you what I know independently, they would lock me up. They would say you're out of your mind. It's that horrible. So good luck Seeing what?
That's the
Go
thing,
ahead.
Lionel.
I'm
You
sorry.
know, and Mike, I want to bring this to you because they've made this highly political. Republicans and Democrats both have used it to point at each other. Democrats only care about it because they think it's going to bring Trump down. Everything they can do. Trump released the Epstein. Trump released the Epstein. Trust me, they could release all the Epstein. The Democrats would have already done it. But to that point, Mike, is there people, why is Trump not just saying, here you go, unredacted, here's all the names, here's the documents, you, media, find out what's true and what's not?
Well, I think that's I think his position. I mean, I think he plays the art of war. I think he sits back and he sits back and lets them beat the drum for him. But to jump on to what Lionel was saying, which to me is a bigger problem. The bigger problem is, okay, yes, we can hold these people accountable, but it's a uniparty. It's not the right and the left, and they want to keep us divided, so we're fighting amongst each other when really they're all on the same team and they all play by the same rules. They play. It's like acting, and Lionel's right too. Again, about when you try to tell people these things, you come across like you're insane, and that's why when making those movies, I had to be very slow into like letting people say,
Yes.
look, if this is true, if this is true, if that's true, you come to your own conclusion. I'm not telling you what to think or believe. I'm just
Exactly.
going to put some information and you come to your own conclusion and then we can have a discussion. But I'm not going to sit here on a soapbox and tell you, you need to believe me because I know X, Y, and Z. It doesn't work like that. So you have to help people along in their awakening. And now it's been 6-7 years. I mean, out of shadows, thank God Elon gave me my account back. We just hit 21 million views 5 years later. So people are listening. People are wanting to know the truth. And that's really what this is about. Discerning over information for yourself and coming to your own conclusion. We can be the torches in the dark, lighting the way, but the people have to grab the torch and carry it.
To the point of that, Lionel, to what he's saying, do you believe that the reason why people are so interested in it now is, one, they're afraid that this is happening again? And how likely is that? I mean, at the time, the whole Epstein network was being set up and happening. Nobody was talking about it, but that was happening. Do you think we potentially could be having a modern-day Epstein network in place right now? And B, another reason why the cover-up is happening is because they don't want to know us to know the full details of the first one so they can continue with the policy in the present day.
Epsteins are like bed bugs. If you find one, there's 1,000. You don't just see one without being more. I got to tell you something, the irony of this. You mentioned Pizzagate. By the way, Pizzagate is a misnomer. Pizzagate was evidence of something which was later on. Do you know what happened? When WikiLeaks came, think about this, and they're going through this and they're saying, what the hell is Podesta writing about? Imagine if I text you or emailed you, Scotty, over and over a pizza and margarita pizza and deep dish. You say, what's this guy talking about? Nobody thought anything about this because they felt with impunity. They felt like they didn't have to worry about anybody. So guess what happened? When all of this happened, there were some people in 4chan, crazy people. A lot of them were pedophiles and degenerates who said, wait a minute, we know what that is. That's in addition to the logos and the swirls. In addition, later on to the FBI, it took 4chan and people in Reddit to give this the name Pizzagate. That's the name they gave it as they discussed it. Were it not for that, nothing would have happened. Can you imagine still, wouldn't you love to see somebody say, Mr. Podesta, or whoever it is, answer me this one question. What's with the pizza? Just answered the question. Of all the things, you were one of the most important people in the pantheon of influence. And this is what you're talking about? What is this? And people will listen to this and they'll say, because I can't understand it. The same way they doubted the whole Catholic Church thing until all of a sudden one day they say, hey, guess what? I believe it now. I predict one day, if we keep at this, it will break that blood barrier division and that firewall, and people will say, wait a minute. Remember the McMartin case? They said, well, that was debunked. Was it? They just say it is because the people who are the most complicit in this are mainstream media, these sock puppet jackals who are the front lines in obfuscating the truth. This is a very complicated Gordian knot. Just keep at it. Don't be frustrated. Don't worry for Pam Bondi to come along. We don't need Pam Bondi. We are the people. I know it sounds like I'm giving a speech for a Norman Rockwell thing, but it's true.
No, you're correct on that, Lionel, and it's frustrating because we should be able to trust our DOJ to come along. They're not going to come along. You're right. At this stage, we're having to win this in a court of public opinion rather than a court of law. To that point, though, Mike, I have to ask you, though, if you were advising this current administration on how to handle it, do you agree with how they've done it? Because let me remind you, on the campaign trail, that's all we heard about. Epstein, Epstein, Epstein. If Trump from the podium often said that. What changed, in your opinion? You have the research. And how would you advise him going forward to be handling the situation to where it could be a win? Because I do think the typical voter will be thinking of this whole action when they go in the midterms when it comes to Trump.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty loaded question. I'm not an attorney, and I'm not really qualified to advise President Trump or anybody like that. But as a person, as an American citizen, as someone who believes that we have a right to stand up and fight for our freedom, fight for our rights, I would say, well, can I say something about okay, let's say Pam Bondi does decide to prosecute someone. She's got to assemble a grand jury. Well, she's in D.C., right? And correct me if I'm wrong, Lionel. And assembling a grand jury to indict one of these people, I mean, 90% of them all vote one way. So how do you legally do that and be successful? That's probably the challenge that, just from my perspective watching it, I mean, I would hope there's RICO cases. I'd hope there's sealed indictments. I know that those things are true, but the timing of this, to me, is when it needs to come out. And if we don't do this before the midterms, if the people don't get serious about the midterms, we're going to have a really bad time.
Okay, Lionel, I've got to give you a dig at this. What would you advise President Trump to handle this? Is this hurting his credibility amongst his own base, his own supporters?
Yes.
Why doesn't he know this? Why is he not doing this?
And by the way, do me a favor, don't come out and say something like, is this really this important? Yes, it's important. What are you talking about? And also, let me tell you something. If this thing involved Russia, I guarantee you would have had more grand juries. They would have been cranking out indictments. They would have had panels. They would have had findings. The grand jury can also issue findings. There would have been subpoenas. There would have been congressional hearings. They would have gone crazy. But the best part about it is that if the wrong country or the wrong people or the wrong big shots are involved, because all of a sudden you've got, put it this way, try finding somebody in Hollywood. Try finding somebody in D.C. who is not connected to this. Or somebody who cannot be embarrassed by saying, if you come after me, I'm going to tell them what you did. Maybe not with Epstein, but with something else. Remember, like George Carlin said, this is a big club and you're not in it. So forget this. Let me just explain this once and for all. Forget it. We have things that happen. We have the attention span of a gnat. Like Gore Vidal says, we are the United States of amnesia. We're going to forget about this. More people are still talking about that stupid bad bunny. This is. So listen, what we do is, there are more of us than them. Nobody's watching cable news. There are websites, there are YouTube channels with one episode. They have more people watching than CNN does for the entire month. This is the future. All of a sudden, when you get somebody who's big, somebody who's a name, somebody who comes forward and gets some momentum of this, the public will scream for more Epstein information. They don't really understand it yet. Remember, we're smarter than they are. Don't tell anybody I said this, but we know more than they do. And we have to teach them almost like children. We have to say, come with us. Come on, Mike. Do your thing about Pizzagate. Hang on. Because the first thing they want to do is dismiss you. That's their defense mechanism. They love calling you. They love calling you a conspiracy theorist. They love that. We're going to fix that.
Well, before I let you go, I have to ask you, in this latest batch that just came out, I was personally surprised to see Mayor Mamdani's pictures. I had no idea there was a tie between Jeffrey Epstein and our new mayor, newly elected mayor that is of the people of New York. What was the biggest, did you have any surprise, and what was that of these latest that you just were not realizing of these latest release? Mike, you first.
There's so many of them. But I want to say one thing before, because I know we got to go, but Lionel's right. I think they're all in on it. And you know what? It's somebody like me in Hollywood, I knew making that movie, it was going to cost me my career. But I also knew that I had just found Jesus and I got my faith and I got restored. Right. And I was like, look, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to stand up for what I believe is right or wrong. I don't care what it costs me. I'm going to stand up and do what I can do and try to help people wake up. Now, I do. That's why I think he's right. They're the right, the left, Hollywood, DC, they're all guilty, or they at least have something on them. And Zorro Ranch is a bigger deal than most people are even looking into. And I was talking with Liz about that last night. And I'm just saying, we got to keep swinging. We got to keep fighting. I'm honored to be on your show. I'm honored to meet you, Lionel.
Yes, sir.
So, thank you.
It's always an honor. Lionel, real quick.
Wonderful. Please be very careful. Listen, Zoran Mamdani is a twit. He's a benighted moonbat, and he's my mayor. But be very careful, especially with AI right now. I don't know what to believe. I don't know. There's pictures of him in the delivery room with Epstein. Be very careful. That being said, pursue the truth, but always ask, how do I know what I know? This is the epistemological point of view. And to keep the fight up. Scottie and Mike, keep it up. I don't need ABC to validate what I'm doing. I know what's right. And I'm going to keep going. You can't stop me. And one day when it becomes hip to talk about this, you won't be able to go anywhere without hearing about Epstein and teaching parents how to protect their children.
Well, they love a state of confusion because they think people immediately just give up. We won't. Thank you. That was legal and media analyst Lionel and creator and director of the film Out of the Shadows and Into Light Mike Smith for joining us today for this conversation. Tonight's revelations underscore something complex. An enormous volume of material has been made public, and much remains obscured or off limits. Reports show deeply troubling communication and the name of high-profile people linked peripherally to Epstein's orbit. But legal experts are still cautious. Mere appearance in documents is not evidence of criminal conduct. And top Justice Department officials have said that additional prosecutions arising from this release are unlikely. But at the same time, survivors and advocates have decried the handling of the files, particularly when redactions, errors exposed, and sensitive personal information are demanding accountability, not just for Epstein and Maxwell, but for the systems that failed them. Now, as the nation digests these files, the key questions remain. Will accountability follow disclosure? And will justice for victims finally catch up with years of silence and concealment? Well, I'm going to stay with it, and I want to thank you for watching Perspective. I'm Scottie Nell Hughes, and we will continue to follow this story as it unfolds.